you do have questions, you can send those through the chat. I will keep my eye on those. But we're going to get started by taking a look at the dashboard. So I'm going to zoom in really quickly here, but I'm just curious, who do I have in the room? And I would love for you to use that same raise your hand if this is your first time getting training and insight, first time really digging into your account. Awesome. Looks like I got a few of you. First timers, wonderful. For those of you who maybe this is a review, I'll talk to both sides of the coin just so everyone gets what they need today. So we're going to start on this dashboard and work our way through in terms of how can you use this. So the dashboard, of course, is your homepage. You can use these colorful boxes if maybe you want to see a high-level report about your outliers. If you've completed your benchmarking, you can take a look at your employees paid below the market. Right off to our right, we see another clickable report that takes a look at our employees on the low end of our internal ranges. Of course, this would mean you would have a structure in place. If you don't have a structure yet, this is something to look forward to. Right down below, the recent activity is a feed of what did you do in here last time. So sometimes that's really helpful to say, I want to jump right back into the job that I completed, or I want to take a look at the most updated market reports from my dashboard. So really helpful from that home page. I also always like to give a shout out to my favorite button, this create a report button. So maybe your scenario is, I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. I need to come in here and price a job. That create a report feature is really handy because now we can see, okay, we're ready to go ahead and price our brand new job, or we can select from one of our existing benchmarks and just refresh that report. So two different options for reports right from that home page. So that's one of my favorite features in terms of how can you use this dashboard. Here's a quick step for you there. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of the lay of the land before we get into the training today. You'll notice this teal bar up at the top. This is how we're going to be navigating through. So click into the Your Workforce with me. This is where all of the kind of foundational data for your account will be. So by that I mean your employee data, your benchmarks, your labor markets, all of that will be in the Your Workforce. This is really the core pieces that we need to do an analysis. So in order to get to market data, what we need, of course, is to run a market job in a labor market. And that's what's going to push us over to this market data tab. So market reports for your jobs is where you'll find all of those market ranges that you've been working on. So always feel free to dive right into the data. Maybe you've inherited this account from someone else on your team and you want to get into the data right away. This is that tab for you. Furthest over is our strategy and analytics section. So higher level functions of the tool. So if you're ready to create your structure, whether it's an internal pay, job-based range, or maybe it's a grade-based structure, this is where you would be building that. We have a raise recommender, and there is an analytics launchpad in this section. So we're not going to spend time in here today in the basic training, but I always say don't be scared of it. Go ahead and poke around in here if you're curious on how any of that works. You can't break it. So strategy and analytics, that's where you can find those higher level functions. So there's one more thing I'm going to say about how the site is organized, and it's going to be about these two tabs on the left-hand side, upper left-hand. You'll notice that we're in the live scenario. This is where we consider here at PayScale to be your real-time workforce, your true employees, your real jobs. This is what you're doing an analysis for. This is your live data. The tab just to the right, called scenarios, is for those types of what-ifs, or maybe you need to do some segmenting. You'll notice it's the exact same drop downs that we saw before, but now you have the option to have a few different types of scenarios in your account. So like for me, I've got one for my ad hoc needs. So maybe you want to come in and play around, price a few jobs, but they're not real jobs. You don't have employees in them yet. A lot of people like scenarios for that, so they can keep their ad hoc reports in a separate folder. Because that's really what these are. They function like file folders for you. So if you wanted to try out a few different things, or maybe you want to push your whole support and service department into their own scenario for you to do some test cases, that's really what these are here for. So you'll see the exact same drop downs, have the exact same functionality, but sometimes it's a great way to keep yourself organized in your account. So that is a really common use case, so that is the difference. We're going to be working in live today for our scenario, so I'm going to click on and be back in my Teal tab for our work today. All right, so now that we've got the lay of the land, we're going to move into the Your Workforce. We're going to click into employees just to show you some really basic things in that section. I think the employees section is probably the most straightforward, but I just want to show you maybe some common things you'd come in here to do. You know, maybe a common thing would be to come in and add a new employee. Up at the top, you'll get used to these icons. They're going to follow us everywhere. But here's your option to add in a new employee. If you're doing a refresh, maybe it's been 6 months and your entire workforce has changed. There's been promotions, there's been people who've left your organization. Of course, you can refresh your data at any time, send it back to us, and we'll get it back into your account. So you can really easily select all of your employees in your project and go ahead, and once that selects every row for you, you can download that out into Excel or CSV, make your changes, send it back to us, and we can get that data into your account. But what about just making a one-off change? Maybe just one person or a few people got a promotion, really easy to give them an update. So using the magnifying glass, I'm just going to search for my employee that I know got a promotion recently. So now here's Erica. You'll get used to the functionality of those orange hyperlinks. Of course, that's what's going to move you into her profile. I could click on her ID or her name to be pulled into her individual profile. So we'll just take a look at her data. And up at the top, I want to go ahead and view her details. So this is what's going to pull me into the edit mode for her. And now I see these edit detail tiles up in that top right-hand corner. So that's really easy to jump into those for those profiles. So a great question that just came in, can you do an incremental refresh, or is it all or none? So you can set the tone really, Bart, when it comes to how often or how much data do you want to refresh. So it doesn't have to be all or none. You can absolutely do, maybe it's just you're updating your engineering department. You can piece things out. So there's no wrong answer when it comes to that incremental refresh. Great question. So I want to jump into her details to change her title. Like I said, she received a promotion. So just going to jump into that edit details. This is where I can see basic information about Erica, like what labor market is she in, her department, and here is her job title. I see it's a drop down, so if she got a promotion into an existing title, I could go ahead and see, okay, you know, maybe she's moved into a completely different role. Now she's a sales lead, and now that is done. If she was being moved into a brand new title, here's your opportunity to add that new job in and go ahead and benchmark it. So that would be another thing that you can just get off your plate and no need to come back in and do it later. So I'm just going to update her job and her internal title and click save. So it's really just that easy. Once you enter that edit mode, be on the lookout for those edit details so you can jump into that employee's information. I'm going to go back to the very first page that we landed on when it came to Erica, that employee compensation report. So this is a really popular feature in the employee section. It really helps in communicating pay to your employees. So maybe you at your organization call this something like a total reward statement. Very similar, we here call them employee compensation reports, but they're really valuable in communicating pay to your employees. So up at the top, you can configure these reports, which just means you can turn certain features on or off depending on where you're at or depending on your communication strategy with your employees. So configure report is going to pull us into the mode where now the green toggle in the top right-hand corner indicates whether or not this will be included on that employee's report. So in the case of Erica, you know, she just got a promotion and now she's still well within range for her new job, 44% within her range penetration. Down here below, you'll notice that the tool does have the ability to include benefit data. So that's what you're seeing here in terms of those company contributions to Erica's benefits. I find this especially valuable for folks because I know, myself included, it's easy to forget the numbers at the end of the year that are being contributed to your medical, health, dental, all of those additional benefits. So this is some additional data you can include. So all of these features, really great, can be added or removed just by toggling in and turning those on or off. When you're happy with your report, of course, you can click Save and Download, or just save if you're not quite ready to download those out yet. So those are really the main tasks in that employee section. I'm going to go back here just to say, of course, after you've entered your advanced search, you can click Show All to bring back the rest of your employees. So they're just behind that filter. Let me know in that question section if you have any other employee-specific questions or challenges. I find the employee section to be, again, usually the easiest for a lot of folks. So I'm going to use that Your Workforce dropdown. And now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. We're going to move into the labor market section of the tool. So if you're following along with me, I'm going into that Your Workforce and Labor Market section. All right, so the labor markets are definitely an important part of the tool. I like to spend just a good amount of time in here making sure everyone feels comfortable with this functionality because, of course, it's an important piece of how are you scoping your data. When it comes to your jobs and you're trying to price your jobs in the market, we want to know what is the market that you're competing in. So it's a strategic question. It's really important to get into the details and try to understand what industries, what segment sizes are impacting the pay for your jobs. So in my scenario today, I've got, of course, 2 locations. I've got employees in 2 different city metro areas. You see that here in Boston and Seattle. Also, my talent pool, it spans 2 different industries. So I'm looking at that electromedical manufacturing, but I also have a SaaS market that I'm thinking about for my Boston roles. So it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all strategy. You know, the story I'm trying to tell today is, you know, I've actually had a hard time getting my technician role filled in Seattle. I don't think this labor market is really capturing all of the data I need when it comes to the market for that job. So I want to come in and create another labor market to try to capture that kind of data. So what I'm going to do is use the plus sign up at the top left-hand corner again to add in that labor market. So you're going to hear me refer to your labor market as your competitive talent pool. So keep thinking about who am I competing with for talent, what type of organizations have the same types of jobs as me. And so when I'm thinking about my technician role, you know, I need to realize that in the Seattle area, there's a Boeing, you know, there's a lot of engineering technical talent here. So a role like technician really has a lot of options when it comes to finding that job in the market. So that's what I'm going to be thinking about when I come in and create my labor market today. And you're just going to come with me. So in terms of display name, it just needs to be a unique name. It doesn't have to be anything too complicated. I'm going to be thinking about my hardware technician market. And so you can just come up with a display name that makes the most sense for you. I say make it easy on yourself. Come up with a naming convention that you can remember the criteria that you're looking for there. So, of course, in terms of location, at this very first step, we're just asking about where do you want to drop that pin down for data. So are you wanting to scope to a city metro area, or do you want to capture a statewide average if you have employees all across the state of potentially Washington for me? Or do you want to capture the broadest average? Do you want to look nationally for information? So choosing your location scope. If you have jobs maybe outside of the US, you want to know what type of international data does PayScale provide, you can see that in this dropdown. I will say that we're the strongest in the United States and Canada. And then choose, of course, from that city if you were searching within that database. So that was the easy part. Now we're going to come down to some of these more strategic questions. And again, we're going to be thinking about our competitive talent pool. So I will preface this by saying, don't fall into the trap of coming in and setting up your labor markets to look just like your organization. I see that a lot, and I really encourage people to think the opposite. So not what are you, but again, what type of employers or competitors are around you? What type of industry around you is impacting your jobs? So like for me today, I know that it's something other than what I've been doing. It's something a little bit more competitive. So I want to first answer the question of organization type. So in this drop down is where you're again selecting what cut of data is the most relevant to you. So if I were a nonprofit organization, it's likely that other nonprofit data would be more relevant to me. Maybe that's the only how I can afford to pay. If I was coming in here and pricing nursing jobs, likely, again, hospital data would be super relevant to me for my nursing jobs. So it's, again, about your talent pool. A common question I get here is, what's the difference between private practice firm and company? Private practice firm is thinking about your private practice law firm or your private practice chiropractor's office. So if you're thinking about for-profit company, then this would be the right answer for you, and it's the right answer for me today. All right, and so now we're on to industry, and this is where it gets interesting because it is a keyword search. So it's thinking about what kind of industry are you trying to look for data in? So if you just start typing here, you can see, oh, okay, here's one that might be interesting to me. You can hover over them. There are some that will be broken out into subcategories, which just means in this option here, you know, I have the ability to say, I'm just curious around this computer disk drive manufacturing. I only want that as my industry. But if I think about my electromechanical technician role, it can really be fluid within this whole market. So I can choose the whole family and that way capture the broader average of that industry. The next question here is the average size. So again, not what is your seat size, but if you're thinking about your talent pool and where your competitors are, you know, what segment are you competing in? So if it's a question of like someplace like Boeing, you know, or in this area, who like large competitors that I'm competing with, what is their seat size? What number am I comfortable with getting a comparison today? I'm going to say, of course, that I'm looking at around 1,000 seats on average. That's the number that I'm comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead and input that as my answer. The rest of these questions are going to get more granular. And so I always like to describe our labor market function kind of like a funnel. It's a funnel for data. So the more information you enter, the more narrow that data set becomes potentially. So some of these additional questions, you're going to have the opportunity to leave blank. So like the question of annual revenue. Sometimes this is a great one to capture a broader average of. You know, if you don't know your competitor's typical annual revenue, that's what this question is asking for. Again, so not what is your revenue, but again, your competitive talent pool that you're trying to model this to look like. So I'm going to leave it blank today because I don't know what my competitive talent pool is in terms of revenue. So feel free to do that. And anytime you leave a field blank, that just means you're capturing, again, that broad average. So that same logic could apply if you perhaps wanted to compete across all industries. You could leave this blank, and that way you'd be capturing the broad average of all industries. So it's really flexible in that way, depending on your strategy for how you want to collect data. So the next question, government contractor. Of course, this is going to be relevant to you only if things like security clearance are impactful for your jobs. If not, I would suggest leaving that unchecked as well. And then on the next page, just again, some more pretty granular questions. So things like filing status. If you know your competitive talent pool enough to know their filing status, here's your option. Same with stock exchange listing. Here's your opportunity to say privately held if that's what's important to you. But today I'm going to capture or leave those open to all as opposed to limiting my data. I'm going to leave my funnel a little bit more open when it comes to those factors. And then finally, these last 4 fields here are just optional fields, so they have no impact on data. They're just user-defined fields for you. So if you want to call a column header something other than what it is, that's really what these are going to do. So I'm going to click on Save, and now I have an additional market to do my comparison. Today, I really want to think about these 2 markets. So how does industry and how does size compete for a job in a market? So that's what we're going to walk through together right now. So come along with me. We're going to go back up to that Your Workforce. And now we're going to talk about benchmarking. So we're going to move into that job section. All right, great. All right, so if you are new to the account, then maybe this is not populated with data yet, but your screen maybe looks a little different than mine. I'm going to show you the difference. So up above the table, you'll notice there's a drop down with 2 different views. the standard view is probably what you're looking at. It's just the default giving you a more concise paragraph when it comes to the job summary. So you can just take a quick glance there and see, okay, this is some of the criteria for the job match. But I find the full details view really helpful. I'm going to show you that too. I find the full details view especially helpful for maybe those folks out there who are coming into an account. They want to see how it was benchmarked. They inherited this from their colleague, and they want to know how are those jobs defined. So you can sort by any column. It functions a lot like Excel, so I'm going to sort by my years of experience so I can see my more entry-level titles to my more senior titles. And then just by scrolling over here, I could see, okay, were there any skills or certifications required? I don't see those as options. Maybe I want to go and check in with that hiring manager to see if there are any skills that they're looking for, education level, and more importantly, that task list. Is that still relevant? Is that job still doing the majority of the same tasks? And any other higher level properties when it comes to those jobs and the benchmarks. So I like the full details view. I'm a bird's eye view person. But what's also really helpful is that you can download this out. So anything that you see in this type of table format means it can be downloaded. So if you wanted to just select the rows that you want to send off to that hiring manager, up above on those icons, you can see the ability to export out into Excel or CSV. So maybe someone else needs to take a look at them. Absolutely, get them out of the tool, share them with other folks on your team. All right, so what we're going to do now is I actually have an Electromechanical Tech 1 title, but I have now a need for a level 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick copy of this job. I'm going to clone it. And that way I can just change some of that criteria to level that job. So I'm hovering over that column and I see this menu pop up. By clicking on that drop down, I see a few different options. So of course I could copy this job to a scenario if I wanted to move it into my ad hoc scenario to mess around with it. But I want to clone this job. And that just means copy. When we say clone, we mean copy. So now here's my opportunity to turn it into Electromechanical Tech 2. And just update that job. And of course, if you don't use job codes, feel free to input your data just like this. So you can just use your title as your job code. No need to come in and create a unique set of numbers and letters if you don't use them. So go ahead and use your job codes or your titles as your job codes. Optional fields in here too if you want to take advantage of them, but 100% optional, so no need to if they're not relevant to you. So since I cloned this job, what's nice about that is it's already selecting the benchmark that I've already chosen. But down below, you can absolutely search within the database. So since this is a level 2, I want to just think about what other type of technician titles are out there, make sure it's still a good match. So I'm going to just look within the database and see those titles come up. So what these are, of course, are benchmarks. So these are common titles used across all industries to unlock market data. And our task today is to find the one that is the most representative of our job. So we want to find the one that really has the same responsibilities and tasks in order for that data to be relevant to you at your organization. So I know oftentimes a job description would really be the best thing to have right now, but I also know it seems like job descriptions are always out of date, or maybe they're being reviewed or edited right now. So I'm just going to use what I know about this job to benchmark the position. So what I like about this section is, okay, I see now down below the task list associated with that job. And the best practice is to say at least 70% needs of those tasks need to be relevant to your job description. So if I'm looking at this, I would want 3 out of these 4 to be essentially the same gist as my job. You know, I know the language isn't always going to be 100%, but it is about the gist of your job being similar, or the majority of those tasks being similar to what your job is doing. So in this case, 3 out of 4 would be a really good match. So really zooming in on what is your job doing, not just what is it called. So What I like here is to use the link save for consideration. That's just going to pull that title up to the top. Now I can compare, okay, for my level 2, is this still a good match? Is this what I would want for my job, and based off of that, their core responsibilities? And I do think that is a good match, this engineering technician for my level 2. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that. So choose is what you'd want to do. Unfortunately, you can't blend two titles together or remove bullets or add bullets. These are set as they are. So that's why it's important to find that best match. If you maybe don't have titles that are as straightforward as mine, or you have some really unique titles, there is the opportunity to search by task and tool. So that is sometimes a great feature for those of you who have less direct job titles. So I'm going to choose my engineering technician, and now be moved into the next page. So we're going to further refine this match now that we have our title. All right, so we're going to come into the second page, and we're going to notice this big blue number. It is attached to those labor markets that we just touched on, so we can get a different estimate of the 50th percentile if we'd like. And now the first thing we're going to talk about is years of experience. So the PayScale tool in general is a tool that measures proficiency, and I can't say that enough, because it's not a tool that measures your minimum requirements. If you put in your minimums, you're going to get the minimum data back. So think about proficiency and really what does your ideal candidate look like, and when it comes to a lot of these factors. So when it comes to years of experience, I want you all to think about how many years of experience does it take to really be proficient at that job. And this is a level 2, and I had for my midpoint for level 1, was 3 years. So I'm saying, okay, how long does it take to really be proficient at a level 2? The graph that we have off to our right sometimes can be really helpful, because again, PayScale, we're collecting data from people in their jobs. So we're collecting that data and noticing the trend where people are seeing a significant shift in their pay as they reach certain milestones. So that's what those green bars represent, is people reaching those milestones in their career or tenure and seeing a significant shift in their pay. So sometimes this can be helpful if you aren't sure, maybe your job description doesn't call out proficiencies, and you want to know what are people in the market saying, or what are we seeing out there in the market. That's what this graph is really here to show you. So I'm going to say 6 years is my midpoint for proficiency for a level 2. That's really where people are really mastering the tasks of this job. So that is my sweet spot for proficiency. So of course, the minimum isn't a required field, but if it helps you to think about it, I always encourage people to fill it in. So minimum 3 years, really proficient right at that 6-year mark. That's what I'm really looking for when it comes to this job. So this is going to follow us and cover our field. So if it bothers you, feel free to close it out using that X in that top right-hand corner. Next, in education level, what is your requirement here? Another way the tool is trying to be helpful is to say, hey, we notice a lot of people are reporting they have an associate's degree. That's why PayScale recommends that particular level. But choose your true requirement here. If I didn't have a requirement, I was open to all levels of education, then I could choose any, capture all, since I don't have a requirement. But of course, I do want to choose associate's degree. My level 2 does not supervise others, but I just want to show you what would happen if you do or are benchmarking people managers. So of course, supervises people, yes, but then you can get as granular as what is that number of supervised. So we are asking you to add up the sum of their direct and indirect reports here. So if you were to be benchmarking the CEO of your company, then the whole organization would be their indirect and direct reports. But if you're benchmarking a team lead, then that's maybe a little bit easier in terms of finding that number from the hiring manager. But again, this tool is like a funnel for data. So if you don't want to narrow your scope to a specific number supervised, then you can always be broad, capture broad averages when it comes to factors. But I would encourage you to say, what is that job's level of management? Are they a team lead? Are they a true supervisor, director, or are they in that C-suite? So choosing that appropriate level of management. So if I had a team lead, they would be an individual professional that has a professional level of people management, and then those tasks that they are responsible for. So choosing those that are appropriate. So for my level 2, like I said, I'm going to say no. But those will come back for you when you are benchmarking your people managers. And now we're on to skills and specialties. So these are some popular answers coming up from the database that you can select to move into your search. But you can absolutely look within this database for those skills that you're looking for. So you can have up to 7 here, and it is just about a keyword search within the tool to find the ones that you're looking for. I really encourage you to think about what skills are driving pay for your job, maybe avoiding those softer skills like Microsoft Excel. You know, at 6 years in your career, I kind of expect you to be proficient in that. I want to think about what would really set someone aside or someone apart in terms of a proficient candidate for this job. So entering those there, and then what certifications do I require? So since I cloned this job, again, that's why you're seeing some of that criteria from my level 1 coming over, and the same certifications are true for my level 2, so I'm going to leave those as they are. And down at the bottom, I want to save and create this because I want to see a report. If you wanted to come back to this job later, of course, you have the option to save, but let's save and create those so we can see the data together. So it's really those 2 pages to benchmark a job. So once you have your title, it's all about just entering in the rest of your criteria, and that is benchmarking. You'll find a handout in the GoToWebinar around how to benchmark your job. So just a reminder, grab those resources out. And here I want to go ahead and select the markets that I'm interested in. Like I said before, I want to compare these 2. I could absolutely select all if I wanted to, but let's run those together, and we can see our results in just a moment. So let me know in that questions box if you have any other questions around job matching. I know it's part art, part science. So before we end the session today, I'm going to call out a few other helpful resources for you all to get access to. All right, so here I've moved over to the market data tab, so you'll always be here when it comes to the market reports section. And starting from the left, we're going to talk about, okay, what is my internal title? But what did I match it to in the market? What is the PayScale title I matched it to? And then we recognize our job code and our labor market. That's why I say come up with a display name that you like, because it's going to show up on your market report. And then I'm going to scroll all the way over. There is a lot of scrolling in the tool. So this is where I can compare those 2 ranges since I selected those 2 labor markets. So usually the math for Insight doesn't matter too much when it comes to report count. But what counts as a report is any connection between a unique job title and a labor market. So you each have 2 data sets here, looking in our electromechanical manufacturing, looking in our computer hardware market. So 2 different reports here. And I can compare them from the 10th to the 90th percentile. If I want, I can sort by the 50th percentile. But it is just slightly more competitive in my hardware technician market for this job. So my inkling was correct. I can see that here from the 10th to the 90th percentile. You'll probably notice the column that says target market percentile. It is the default setting in the tool for it to be set to the 50th. So if that's what you're seeing, it is a default setting. But your target is where you're wanting to meet the market, essentially. And so I have a strategy to want to lead the market at the 65th percentile, which just means I want to pay at that top 35% of the market. I want to retain my folks, and I want to attract top talent. So I'm going to pay a little bit above the average, which is the 50th percentile. Of course, if you have a different strategy, you can absolutely change it. There's a handout, again, in that GoToWebinar about how to change your target market percentile. But that's what you see being pulled out in the farthest column for me that says my annual base ed target. So a nice handy tip is you can hover over any column, get us an exact explanation of what that means. So feel free to do that if maybe you aren't sure what is this. You can hover over it, get a quick cut and dry explanation. So if this is what you were needing, good news, you can go ahead and select and download this out. You're done. Download that out into Excel or CSV, share those ranges with other folks on your team. But there's a few other views I want to show you. In the drop down in the center of the page is how you can change the mode. based off of what are you trying to accomplish. So if you open up that drop down, you can see base pay, you can see market total cash compensation, so you can easily change the mode. And the drop down, I can also switch it to looking at the market trends. And the market trends is what's connected to that widget that we saw at the top of the hour saying, hey, do you have hot jobs? Because the tool is essentially looking back. As soon as you run a market report, you can take a look at the trends. And the tool is going to look back quarterly, annually, if you need to do any forecasting, and see, are my jobs heating up or are they cooling down? PayScale considers a job hot when it's moved more than 3% in the most recent quarter. So really easy to hover over those to get a quick cut and dry explanation. So a question just came through is, how do I change my target market percentile? I might encourage you to just go ahead and download that handout, just because I want to be sure we can get through everything under the basic training today. So unfortunately, I don't have time to go through how to actually change it, but you'll have that handout, which is a step-by-step guide to doing just that. So before we get into some of the additional views, of course, you can get into the detailed view. So if you're following along with me, I'm going to be clicking on the hyperlink here that says view. That's going to give us some more context to what we're looking at. So come along, we're going to come into the detailed report, and I want to take a look at my hardware technician market. All right, so the detailed report is, hence the name, just going to give you some more details about the report. So we're going to come in to see a few more boxes. And these boxes are showing us what are the types of compensation that people in the market are reporting to PayScale. So we see if there's a base, bonus, there's profit sharing, there's an hourly rate out there. And what I always like to draw people's attention to is the percentages in the bottom right-hand corner of each box. So we get to see the percentages reporting each type of compensation here. So we get to see, how common is something like a bonus. Only 31% of people are saying they get some type of incentive bonus. How common is something like profit sharing? Even less common, only 8% of respondents are saying they get any type of profit sharing. But of course, within each box, the tool is calculating the 10th to the 90th percentile just based off of that population reporting that type, right? So that 10th to the 90th percentile for bonus can only be calculated based off of the profiles receiving that type. So that is how you can use those percentages. Maybe you can know if you're in the majority of people, or maybe you're in the minority of people offering that type of compensation. So you can always use those percentages to think about, okay, how common is this? But I think another way those percentages are helpful is, a common question I get is, if I were to add up the 50th percentile across these different types of compensation, you'll notice it's not going to equal my total cash compensation. That's a very common question, especially if you're sharing this report with your hiring managers or maybe your executives. But what I would love for you to remind them, or just remember, is those percentages in the bottom right-hand corner. Because each box is calculated separately, the total cash is the average of all. So total cash is the average of all profiles reporting for that title. So they'll never be able to equal each other, because not 100% of people are getting 100% of the different types of compensation. In this scenario today, you will hourly and annual will always add up to 100%. So we see 49% of people are getting a base, 51% are getting an hourly rate. Those two will add up to 100% of the time. But when it comes to those other types of compensation and total cash is the average of all. So we just would love for you all to be prepared for that if that question comes up at your organization. Another great call out here on the detailed page is the report rating. Another thing, you can hover over the tool to get a quick explanation of what is this. So in the case of the report rating, I find it helpful to actually think about the report rating as if the tool is putting all of the profiles that we've received for this report on a graph. And when it's getting a high rating like it is today, it's saying, that graph is a pretty consistent bell curve. There's not a lot of outliers statistically. The 10th to the 90th percentile, those profiles are pretty much clustered together. There's not a lot of outliers when it comes to pay for this job in the market. It's a pretty highly consistent job. You will have jobs, of course, that are less less consistent, more variable. And that has a lot more to do with that graph turning into a scatter plot as opposed to being clustered together. So you'll notice that to be true for jobs like sales. I've seen it almost all the time for sales roles, because there's more variability in how those jobs are compensated, or executive jobs have a lower rating. So you can influence this. Sometimes I'll get an email saying like, how can I get a 5? You can't influence it or manipulate it, and neither can we. So it's really just a helpful tool to be able to talk to how consistent or how variable is your job out there in the market. So I'm going to come down here. Of course, if you needed to send this off in an email, here's your job summary. You could copy and paste that into an email. Really easy there. But I like to come to this section because this is a great place to get some feedback in the tool. So we're on that same home page for the detailed report, but I'm looking at the factors by precedent. And what it's doing here is actually giving you a ranking system. So what it's doing is, of course, we recognize all of our factors here, but it's ranking our criteria by which one or from top to bottom, which one is really making the biggest dent on pay, which one is the most to least impactful when it comes to this job out there in the market. So I find this a great place to go after you've benchmarked a job. Maybe you weren't 100% sure about some of your inputs. This is where the tool is really helping you do a little bit of a gut check. So we're looking here to see, okay, the industry that we input, that's really important, and we talked about that before, and it's no surprise to see that here. Also the years of experience I'm looking for and the skills I'm looking for. So I find it to be a great place, again, to make sure you're defining the things that are falling towards the top as accurately as you can. Because like it's saying here, if you were to change the industry that you were looking in, that might change your range. Or if your years of experience is actually something completely different, that would also change your range. So it's just giving you that feedback, and I find this to be a great conversation starter with maybe that hiring manager to say, what other skills are you looking for? Because that might change. That might change the range for this job. So please send me the skills that you really want for this job match. So really helpful. Other things to look at in the detailed report, everything in the sidebar here, these are all hyperlinks. So you could potentially spend a lot of time in the detailed report. We could take a look at the market trends in a graph form. But most people want to get into these compensation influencer charts. These are really popular. And so we'll spend time talking about one of these before we transition back to the market reports. So the graph is the same information as the table below, and it's turning it into an hourly rate since the majority of profiles were reporting their pay in an hourly rate. But we see this is the same base salary search, same 50th percentile we saw on our previous page. So here is that same number. And now what the tool is doing is it's doing a little bit of an elastic search here, and it's really trying to help you see what would happen if certain factors were to change. So in the case of skills and experience, or in this case, hourly rate by experience, it's looking at that factor of years of experience. So I benchmarked my job to say 6 years was my midpoint. And then down below, it's giving me an idea of what would happen if maybe I changed that to maybe 8 years or somewhere in the 15-year zone. So it's giving you an estimate of as if that factor were to change. But of course, it is truly an estimate. So sometimes it's really just more helpful as a talking point of, okay, but if you were to hire someone with 15 years of experience, that expectation would change. So this is will also include one of these graphs and tables. So you can come in and see, okay, well, what would happen if I did define my number supervised? So it goes page of the sidebar, so if you want to dig into the data, it's a 30-page report. You can click on this and download it out. I want to show you the summary because the summary is 6 pages and usually is the more popular option. So I'm going to click on that just to show you that report in just a minute. So clicking on either one of those will pull you into a PDF. So we'll go ahead and view our report. And to no surprise, it's going to look a lot like the website. So as I scroll down, you're going to get those different boxes with the different types of compensation. Again, now you're prepared to talk about those percentages in the bottom right-hand corner. Here we see our job summary with that list of factors. So you're also going to have that list of factors by precedent to talk about. The benefits summary comes out on that because a lot of people like that, as well as that years of experience graph. So if you really found that helpful, good news, it'll come out on that summary report. We have it in an hourly rate, and here I see it in a salary by experience as well. So 2 options for this one. And then finally, the methodology. And I always like to zoom in here because, of course, I know people are going to ask you, who is PayScale and how are you getting this information? So, of course, PayScale, we are collecting data from people in their jobs. I've referenced that a few times, but it's important for everyone to, again, just double-click on the fact that we are crowdsourced data. But a more important piece of information is also that we spend a lot of time making sure the information we receive from folks is valid. So by that, I mean it goes through a pretty extensive list of checks and automation in order to be accepted as a profile within the database that you have access to. So it talks a little bit about how we defend against bad data, but then it also talks about how the tool is looking within that database for the profiles that are the most like your job. So it is talking about the algorithm here and how it's looking for those compensable factors that you're defining. We also have a team of data scientists that review our data to make sure that we don't have any statistical outliers. So it does get thoroughly scrubbed in order for it to be active in our database. So this is the last page on every report that you download out as a PDF. So you can absolutely rest assured you can come back and reference it later, but that will be the last page of those reports. So we're almost at that last 10-minute mark, and I have a few more things to show you. I want to call out here that there are 2 tiles to edit any information. So if perhaps you wanted to go back and edit your labor market or your job description survey, here are 2 tiles to take you back to where we were. Save yourself a few clicks. I know sometimes it's easy to get lost in the tool, so be on the lookout for those green edits to take you back to where you were. I want to go back to my market reports for my jobs because I want to show you, I think, the report everybody wants to get to. So first things first, you'll notice you've got 43 reports in your account, but I'm only seeing 2. So again, where are they? They're just behind this filter. So click on the Show All button, or perhaps click on the button that says Clear. Don't be scared of it. It's not going to clear your data. It's just going to clear the filter that you're in. So now I could see all of my benchmarks. You know, I'm still looking at that market trends view, so I can come up to this drop down, change it back to my annualized base pay. Easy enough. So now I could see all of my ranges because I've completed all of those benchmarks for my jobs. And now the question is, how are my employees stacking up to this? I want to see how my employees' pay is comparing to the market. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay in this page, but we're going to change how we're viewing this table. So it's just coming up to this link here that says employee name, and that's going to be the one that we click on when it comes to pulling in our employee data into this page. So click on employee name, and that's just going to reload the page. And now I can already see my employees' IDs and their names. So again, we're just viewing this report with our employees' names on them. And that's just going to pull everything that was on that employee section into this section. So we can start to do our analysis. So as I scroll over, I'm going to scroll all the way over. All right, so now I see this green column. This is my annualized FTE base pay. Same data that I saw in the employees section I see here now, but it's called out in green, so I know it's my internal employees' pay. And here is that market spread. it's calculating based off of the full 10th to the 90th percentile, but it's truncating it a little bit for you here just to save you some space. You can absolutely hide columns just by sorting and clicking hide column, and that will just kind of remove some of these ones that maybe we don't want to see. So you can hover over any column, you'll see that menu pop up like we've seen before, and hide that column. So sometimes can be helpful if you don't have a large screen. But we have 3 different columns that are doing an analysis for us. Again, you can hover over any of them to get an explanation. But in the case of the base delta dollar and percentage, it's looking at your employee's pay in the 50th percentile and essentially giving you a figure of what would it take to get someone to the 50th percentile in a dollar amount or a percentage to get to that 50th percentile. Another measurement that we have is the target market ratio. And a ratio is really just a simple division, right, between our target, which is the 65th percentile, and our employees' pay. So I think it's a helpful way to use this is to know that anyone that would be getting paid right at their target is going to have a target market ratio of 1. So here is someone who's getting paid almost directly at their target, right? Since they're getting paid at I see the 68th percentile. You know, that is, I think, the easiest column to understand because that is that employee's actual market percentile of annual base. So this is what a lot of people want to get to. You might be wondering, why do I have red circled employees? That's because I have a structure in my tool. So I have an internal minimum and maximum. You've seen that before when we looked at the range penetration for my employee. That's what this refers to. So if you don't have a structure yet, then you wouldn't need those red or green circled employees quite yet. So if this is what you really needed, you can go ahead and select all of these employees and download them out. So select all, really just going to check every row for you, and now you're ready to download those out. So this download bulk PDF option, really handy. Here's all those PDFs of those employee compensation reports if you're ready to go ahead and include those. Can be downloaded out. I'm going to go ahead and click clear, and so I can bring back the rest of my tiles here. And here is my opportunity to unhide those columns if I wanted to bring those back. So just like Excel, you can unhide them at any time. Really easy to do that. So in the last 5 minutes, I want to show you a few other high-level kind of resources. But again, feel free to send in those questions in the last 5 minutes. I want to make sure that if you do have any specific challenges that we can talk about those today. I wanted to show you the Support Center. The Support Center is a really great resource. It's up right next to your email address, up at the top of the page. And the Support Center is a really helpful place to go if you need more help. We have tons of quick videos. So maybe you want to watch a quick video around benchmarking, or you want to watch some quick videos around the labor markets. Here are some of those quickly viewed videos. Also, you can search within the tool if you're wanting to know, like, oh, I forgot what total cash was. You can come in and see those videos, those resources that we've loaded into that Support Center. I'm going to give 2 plugs. One is for product webinars. Of course, you're in one today. But there's a few in here that I would call out as really great to come back to, maybe on your own, like everything underneath this Getting Started tab. So the Comp 101 and 201 series is really popular. Also, one about job matching. Maybe you're ready to get more strategic. All of these are on demand. You can come in and watch them whenever you want. Also, in that Comptopia tab, so we talked about product webinars, but there's also Comptopia. And Comptopia is a user community of other HR professionals like yourselves who are just asking their peers, what is everyone else doing? So I would point you to, when you come in, you're going to see a landing page with challenges or just like what's going on in compensation. But I would always point people to the discussion board. The discussion board is where a lot of your peers are coming in to ask really great questions. So an example would be like, how many paid holidays is everyone getting, or things like educational assistance. This is other HR professionals like yourselves asking their peers, having access to others, and just sharing information. So really great resource. All of that is in that support center, so you can use these tabs to find that information. And again, we use that link right next to our email address up at the top to do that. So in the last 2 minutes, I haven't seen any questions come through. I know usually it's usually after you come in and maybe play around some more that you have some questions. I understand. So in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you might have noticed there's this little question mark that's hovering in the bottom right-hand corner. Maybe it's being covered up by something, but that is a great way to get help. If you have questions, that will reach you. You'll be connected with our support team. You could tell us maybe what is your problem. Maybe it's that refresh that I'm doing for just one group of your employee. So you can send us a little note. We'll get right back to you. Also has their phone number up at the top here if you prefer to talk to someone. So that little question mark is a great resource to get help as well. So I'm just going to remind everyone, hopefully, that you've had some time to download the handouts. So things like setting that target market percentile, getting back to some of the reports that I showed you, benchmarking, all of that loaded into that handout section. So please take a minute to download those out now. Everyone also is going to receive a follow-up email, so you'll receive an email also. At the end of the session, we have a slight or a short survey. We're always looking for feedback around how we could do better. So feel free to take the time to do that if you have a moment. We always would appreciate your feedback. So with just a minute left, I again haven't seen any questions come through, but I do want to thank everyone for your time today and joining this session. If you feel like you've gotten everything that you needed, awesome. If you need any additional assistance, please reach out to us and let us know. Really want to make sure you're getting the most out of your Insight account. So I'll hang on there for another minute, but thank you everyone, and have a great rest of your week.